Hi, I'm Taylor, and I want to talk about model timescales. Now, I probably care too much about timescales, but I care about for two reasons. One, what is the total period being covered, right, in terms of number of months, number of years, etc., and the actual period being used, whether it's months, quarters, or years. And so, the reason why I care about them is like twofold. One, what type of a length of period of time am I trying to cover with this forecast? And what's the degree of precision or detail of thinking that I'm trying to build into the forecast? Now, I am generally of a proponent that building a monthly model is a very valuable exercise. It's very valuable to actually think about the actual kind of cost granularly over time, because small changes month to month or looking at annual numbers can obscure important insights that happen on a month-to-month basis, especially when you're looking at things like cash. So it's very important, especially for companies that care about managing their cash, to really build like a monthly model. Now, that only happens for a period of time. It's useful to forecast like on a monthly basis for like a year out, maybe 2 years out, maybe during the period of which you have a set of external fundraising where that kind of is intended to cover. Beyond that, that's where it gets harder. Most times for like model reasons, we just execute the model the same time period going forward in so many years because it's easier to make sure there's no inconsistencies and mistakes. Sometimes you build a model that starts off monthly for a period of time and then switches to annually, for example, and that's okay too. What I do struggle with a lot in terms of conversation covering time scale is around building 5-year models. Building a 5-year model for a mature business is a valuable exercise because you usually have enough data and operating history and a consistency to a lot of the metrics and growth curves to create a 5-year forecast. It's important, and a lot of your budgeting and major strategic decisions are probably operating on that sort of a time scale. For most early-stage companies, it's just not. Right, you're much more focused on things that are going to happen over the next 6 to 12 to 18 months than really worry about like 5 years from now. 5-year exercise becomes an idea of like forecasting how big the business can be, but it really doesn't have a ton of like value to like real strategical thinking, and can often be it can often be distracting in terms of the actual results. So in most of my models, I build 60-month 5-year forecasts, and I really only do it because people ask me to. If it was me, I would never build a 5-year model. I build 2 to 3-year models, and so I've been trying to focus on different ways to approach this. In the latest version of the Runway and Cash tool, I try to recast this in a different light, and I did this and try to create a more flexible timescale around this. And basically, the way I did this is I said I create a couple of inputs that says dates, right? So a date of the first period in the model and the fiscal year end. And I've kind of always done that, enable you to create the fiscal year end separate from the calendar year end and let the model handle the accounting appropriately. The new add is around this like base timescale idea. And so what I've done is I basically said, okay, you can choose what you want the base timescale to be, whether it's monthly, quarterly, or annual. And then you can choose a number of periods that you actually kind of want to use to evaluate. By base sense, the max in this model is 36 months, but it's also really easy to just insert columns, just make it 60 months if you really have to. And so what that does is it gets used on the forecast sheet here, and it creates a time scale that goes across for 36 months. That gets then aggregated into years for annual summary. Now, you can also just change this though. So you could change it to quarterly or change it to annually and say, maybe I just want to make a 5-year annual forecast. And so what happens is the actual forecast itself now switches to a 5-year model. It's hard to make it automatically hide all these time periods. I actually made it so that the calcs don't report any numbers. I can't do it to report the rows. But you can't just hide the columns if you want to. But now all of the base numbers, all the base forecasts are really driven by annual forecasts, and then the summary again is driven in an annual summary. And so you can do the same thing and switch it to quarterly. You can make it a 10-year annual. You can adjust it. You can make for example, you could make a 18-month monthly model, for example, and now your forecast is going to reflect that. And so what I've tried to do is make it easier for people to create longer or shorter time periods for the model. And then also deal with times when people say, I don't want to build a monthly model. I just want to build a quick, easy annual model for 5 years, for example, for their own purposes. Or quarterly, for example, if they don't want that level of kind of monthly detail to it. So try to get a little more flexible about that. But that's how I approach this problem. What I would say for you, if you're building a model, is think about what's the level of detail that's valuable for me to use to make decisions around my business. That's the level I should probably be forecasting. And then what's the time period that's relevant for me to really kind of budget and think about I can see in the future. If you have any questions, happy to help.